Now we're ready to go? Okay, so here's how we're going to go. I'm going to give you a hand position, a mudra, to channel your energy, and I'll suggest a meditative focus for you to do. I'll ask you a journaling question to get the psychological juices flowing. Then we'll chant Om together 3 times as a group, and then I'll go into my little Dharma discourse. I'll go out on a limb and share my distorted view of yoga. And I say distorted view of yoga is because the fact that I'm even speaking already indicates there's a distortion. One of my teachers, Swami Satchidananda, said often, truth is best expressed in silence and most easily understood in silence. So I'm violating the first principle, that's why I'm saying going out on a limb, but discourse and language needs to be articulated really clearly, especially in our day and age, because there are so many ways that censorship is preventing free thought, and that means also it's free speech. And it's really important for all citizens of whatever persuasion to remember the importance of the humanities and to study the sweep of history, and therefore have a critical intellect to add to the issues that we all face today, civically, socially, politically, and globally. Nonetheless, I will take the risk of leadership which knowingly is going to offend somebody. And for the benefit especially of the new students, for me, and welcome to Kriya Temple, some of you here for the first time also, I am a self-confessed provocateur. My job is, in part, to poke you. And even though one of my students says, don't poke the bear. Why? Because you'll get a reaction. And that's it. So for my way of choosing to communicate to you, I would say, remember that I'm looking at you like you're a traumatized war veteran. And that you just returned from having seen shit that no human being should have to see, experienced things that no human being should have to experience, and then you'd admit I also did things that no human being should have to do, but you did. And so now, although we knew how to turn you into a warrior and set you loose so you could suppress the impulse to mercy at any time you want, but now we want you to normalize and come back to life and somehow fit in and either forget, repress, deny, hide, or somehow make sense of what the hell did you just experience. And now I'm supposed to come back and just take my place in society and raise a family and whatever. Okay. So I don't go there. I go to the place where I feel if you acknowledge that part of you, then I don't know which emotion I need to get out so you can feel again. Because it's really hard to stay present with your feelings. It's like being in a therapy class all the time. It's really intense to do that. I need a break. But yet, as a human being, you don't have a break. Even the Buddha said every moment of consciousness is a moment of feeling. So how real do you want to get with your feelings? First principle, awareness hurts. So to that extent, I'm a modern-day Buddhist. Awareness hurts. You're pursuing only the light and love part of yoga. That is the end of the path, not the beginning of the path. Anybody who tells you anything else, have them call me, because that's a spiritual con job. To awaken means there's going to be conflict and adversarial relationships and difficulty. We try to do it in the most gentle way possible through asana practice that has simultaneously gets rid of the tensions that are in your tissues, teaches you to breathe and allow things to come through you a little more clearly, focuses your consciousness so you're not disarrayed all over the place, and then give you a transcendental ethic without having to believe in a dogmatic morality that underlies everything that makes what the values of Western civilization are all about. The sovereignty of the individual and the affording of that person ultimate respect, because They are a chip off the old block. They are an embodiment, an individualized monad of the living spirit. And just as a consequence of that, they get my vote, even though they may act in ways that don't show that that realization is coming through. Nonetheless, I want to provoke you both with any kind of joy and bad jokes possible, because if you can laugh already, that's a breakthrough. And every culture has its own way of trying to like break through so they can handle the different difficult aspects of what their own cultural history and ethnicity is all about, as you'll see in my presentation. But the flip side is also true. If I say things that offend you and get you angry, or make you afraid to think of that, or make you sad, good. Because if you're feeling, then we've broken through that wall of isolation that makes you want to hole up and not be with people, or not show your true self, because your feelings have been trampled and then you have to protect them in some way. And one way to protect them, of course, is to pretend you don't have any. So if I get to you at that level, wonderful. And if not, then the asana work stands by itself. Okay, so tonight we're going to crisscross our fingers like this, but not close your palms together. You're going to interlock your fingers, including your thumbs, at the first joint. That's the one below the nail. Don't go any further toward the palm. It's called Vajra Pradama. Vajra Pradama, V-A-J-R-A, Pradama, P-R-A-D-M-A, Pradama, Vajra Pradama. Everybody say that? Vajra Pradama. It means unshakable confidence. So one of the things that enables you to go into yoga is, at some point, you choose to have faith in this. You heard it was true, you want it to be true, and now you're on the path to find out just how true is it. And then your whole life journey is an ongoing story, right? Because now if you've bought the yoga narrative, and this is another one of my teachings, we're all looking at our life through the lens of a certain narrative. And yoga provides, have been living under an illusion. You got to be disillusioned in order to wake up to whatever reality is, yeah? So that's not an easy thing to face. Yeah, so Vajrapadam, unshakable confidence in what you're all about when you're involved in yoga. So close your eyes, and for 1 minute, pay attention to the feeling of the body, breath, brain, and mind, which is, how's your posture? What kind of musculoskeletal configuration you're in to hold this pose? What kind of breathing is going on? What kind of respiratory demand is being made upon you, however slight? And then distinguish your brain from your mind as the sensory input. What are you hearing, touching, tasting, smelling, and seeing while you're doing this? Versus the mental apparatus that is defining, analyzing, labeling, categorizing, and telling you what it is. All right? So 1 minute in Vajrapradama, and begin now. Maintaining Vajrapradama Mudra, now let your meditative focus be on projecting Shanti, or peace, to the world. So whether you do this by following the dictum, power collects around stillness, and just be absolutely as still and quiet as you can, and how that in itself is going to radiate a certain kind of energy without being directed by thought, or simply say, I am a radiating center of goodwill, and just have that thought burst forth from you like the rays coming from the sun. And begin now. Maintaining Vajrapradama Mudra. Now, your journaling question for the day is, what do you want to take home with you as a result of tonight's session? Very important to create your sankalpa or intention, and then how could you get it outside of this class? 1 minute, reflect on that. As a group, gently breathe in. As long as I'm capable, I'll probably continue to do it in some form or another, but I never take for granted the gift being given to me to do this, so thank you all for making this possible. Picked up both my daughters from the airport today because my youngest daughter's bridal shower is tomorrow. Whoa! So I'm really in one of those milestone moments, and I just cannot tell you what a thrill it is. I happen to be close to my daughters, and I indulged them terribly. I was really a bad dad that way, no boundaries whatsoever. But thank God, the mother was the bad cop, so they grew up getting some decent parenting. But so we went to a gluten-free restaurant, because one of my daughters is really, really food sensitive, right? It's one of the things I'm happy about. We're back on now?
Yep.
For now? Good. Well, then let me say it now. I'm really glad to be alive. I want to make sure that they get that on Cosmic Candid camera, okay? So she's gluten sensitive, so there's, I knew about this restaurant on the north side, Wheat's End. It's on Clark Street, so, she was so excited to go there. But I was really happy about that. The one thing we talked about was, they got good food values. They grew up eating clean, and they're both really, really conscious about their diets. So we were talking about, I'm the cook and the shopper, we were talking about the lunches I used to make them. They still remember the lunches, right? So that was like a stitch going through all the things that Daddy used to pack for them. Anyway. All right, so that's my little personal anecdote. So I want to divide my little presentation into two things. First of all, although I said about provoking people, remember, everything I'm saying is all about me. This is one of my ongoing caveats. But there's nothing personal in it. So you have to understand where I'm coming from as a teacher, to use my own life as an autobiographical symbol for you to recognize the patterns. And if you don't get it from me, then the images that you'll see cross-culturally ought to awaken that in you, to make you realize the same thing is happening in your life. This is your story version of it. So, what works for me may not work for you, but if you carry more for this is great. One of the influences early on, when I was much more in my light and love career, I would say, where everything was translated into the brightness, the fullness, the expansion, the transcendence, the metaphysicality of everything, the occult aspects of the world that were hidden from view and I wasn't taught about in school. And of course, my brain was pickled by a lot of acid at the time, but it didn't invalidate the cosmic freedom and emotion that was afoot in the zeitgeist of my coming of age in the 60s. But one of the things I always like to say also, please keep reading, everybody. Even if it's Kindle, but stay off the internet unless you're reading. It's such a time suck. Learn to read, it's really important. Film can do it, radio can do it, right? But reading is really important to help you form images and make you more articulate. Anyway, I was fortunate to grow up where we read all of the classics and then were motivated without having to be mandated to go on further, because there is some great literature. And remember, fiction can sometimes express things that nonfiction can't, or does better. William James is one of my favorite authors, who's one of the fathers of American psychology. He wrote a lot of stuff for teachers, just in the educational field. But my favorite work of his is The Varieties of Religious Experience. And he has one chapter just on what I call healthy mindedness. So a little communication from William James to us. It's hardly conceivable that the large body of intelligent people who compromise yoga practice should continue to exist if the whole thing were a delusion. It is not a thing of the day. It is not confined to a few. It is not local. True, there are many failures recorded, but that only adds to the argument. Many and striking successes counterbalance the failures, otherwise the failures would have ended the delusion. Healthy-mindedness diverts your attention away from disease and death as much as we can, opposite of the Buddhic teaching. But this is anything but absurd. It helps you to look at the dignity rather than the depravity of human beings. We are all connected to two spheres of thought, a shallower and a more profound one, either of which we may learn to live in more habitually. Through the subconscious part of ourselves, we are already one with the divine without any miracle of grace or abrupt creation of a new inner being. Essentially, the life of the infinite spirit and the life of a human being are identically the same. They are one. They do not differ in essence or quality, only in degree. In just this same degree that we come into contact with the realization of our oneness with infinite life and open ourselves to the divine inflow, do we make ourselves channels through which the infinite intelligence and power can work. We can rise to any heaven we choose. When we choose to rise, the higher powers of the universe continue to help us heavenward. Turn within to the illumination from our deepest consciousness as we turn to the sun for warmth and light from without. Live in that presence, and when one does live in that presence, one discovers the unreality of the objects to which one has hitherto been engrossed in. All things come as an accessory or a natural result of a life sunk deep in the bosom of spirit. As Jesus said, seek ye first. So the healthy-mindedness is this. It is base and unworthy to pine and mump. It fastens and perpetuates the trouble which occasioned it and increases the total negativity of the situation. I never show tolerance to the sway of an ugly mood. I zealously emphasize the brighter while minimizing the darker. Thus, my resolution is not to indulge in misery, beginning with me, and not stopping until I have brought the entire frame of reality under a systematic conception congenial to my needs. I love that. But the flip side of that is confront your shadow. So that's not just a pie in the sky thing. Both things exist at the same time. You'll be way too abstract if you deny the tragedy of your own life. Even if your life is seemingly fine, there's a shit show of horror all around us, in the periphery. But everyone's life has a tragic component to it. Now, the only difference, or the only way I'm able to make sense of living in the healthy-mindedness and not being in denial about the other stuff that impacts my life as well, is when I'm really vigilant and in touch, I save my negative bullshit for my men's circle or for ritual space. I have a designated area where now that I'm here, this is my 12-step program, this is my, therapy room, this is the place where I fillet myself and let it all out and get the support from other people there to help me do that and let me support them as they do the same. And then that's it. I wash my hands of it and that's it, and I come back into my world and I'm back to this. Bringing everything into a systematic conception that's congenial to my desire to be in a certain place, peaceful and happy and strong and direct and helping and compassionate and suffering no fools. And I can do that more freely because I'm not in denial about this other side. But I don't spew it to all and sundry. I'm very conscious, even in my day-to-day conversations with people who are not aligned with whatever I think I might be aligned with, to mark my words carefully. As the rabbis say, I always like to get a Jewish teaching in the beginning of Shabbos, nothing is more singly determinative of whether or not you are worthy of a portion in the world to come as the quality of your speech while you were alive. And every time you say something negative, metaphorically speaking, there's a prosecutor in heaven who tallies one against you. And every time you say something clear or refrain from doing something because you realize it could be potentially hurtful or gossipy or create in the mind of another an image of the person who you're bad-mouthing that may or may not be true. When you don't do that, you say something nice and kind and whatever, then a defense attorney tallies one for you. And it's going to be a little judgment day, they call it. Except I think it's a lot more in your own consciousness. Nonetheless, watch your words. Yoga, ahimsa. Be as harmless as possible in your life. And satya, be truthful at the same time. Really tough to do. Nonetheless, healthy-mindedness is what I'm talking about, but I'm doing it in a broader way than just Sergeant Pepperland and love is all you need, which I also believe. Okay. To begin. This is called my tape, Yoga, Mentor and Midwife of Consciousness. Yes. I haven't seen this in a couple of years. I was looking through my tapes. What haven't brought out to people in a couple? Oh, this one. Fine. The wise old man, Obi-Wan, the Jedi Master. Are there any Star Wars fans here, just so I can see? Closet, so you don't want to raise your hand? Thank you. Great. I like the fact that, of course, beginning with Leia as like the one semi-power female in the early ones, right? It is now morphed into like, like the main kick-ass heroine is not a man. Yeah, chicks in space. Okay, I love it. So he is the prototype, in one image, right, of the wise old man, or Yoda, or the guru figure. Does it matter if it's a guy in space who's taking the Jedi training, mastering the Force? I mean, open to the metaphors. I hold the spirit of the ancient and the spirit of the new. I can mix them like water into one well of wisdom. Because there's a transmission going on, right? He's training Luke to be the next one in the lineage to pass on this knowledge. All right. So one of the things I like to share with people is don't forget your roots. Ancestry.com, give a little sputum somewhere and find out what the hell's going on. Even if it's not true, it awakens images, Family genealogy. My mom passed in January. I just went a couple of weeks ago with my wife and daughters to the apartment to, get the last few things that we might want with the jewelry and the pictures and stuff like that. And we discovered some crazy, wonderful pictures of people who we didn't even know. And so, nobody's left in the family. My mom was 99 when she passed. Nobody was left in the family. There are no stories we can get from anybody who's still there. Who are these people? I know that we heard that one of our relatives went to Argentina. We lost totally contact with him. And it says on the back, Enrique. And you can see the postcard, Buenos Aires. Is this our family? Why or they just know somebody? I don't know. Then Uncle Max, my paternal grandfather's brother, who went to Portland. We never met him. Never saw him. Heard no stories about him. Where his life? We have relatives? I don't know. So a cautionary shot across the bow. If your grandparents or even great-grandparents or parents are still alive, even if there's some friction at some level, ask some questions that you never asked before about their childhood. What do they remember about their parents and their grandparents? And if your grandparents are alive, right, ask them. Because if you haven't heard stories, because they never took the time and you never asked them, maybe they thought you weren't interested, and maybe you weren't at that stage of your life. This is the people whose blood and bones without which you wouldn't be here. Don't you find that that's a part of your history that's interesting? Even though I condemn you for not knowing world history, how about your own history? One generation, I don't even know the name of who my grandparents were. This hit me so strong in one of the men's initiations weekends that we do. You go and you try to remember the names of the people in your own generation, gender-wise. I am the great-grandson of Herschel Graff, grandson of Louis Graff, and Abe Wolf, son of Harvey, brother of Alan, father of blah, blah, blah. And you hear all these guys do this with the names and say, you realize, oh my God, your skin stands on end, at least mine does, to realize the connectedness that people have and how sad it is when one person just says, son of blah, 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 and can't even remember the name of the grandfather or the grandmothers or whatever. Really important. So, just a little thing. If you have a chance to, while you can, to ask some questions and learn about your own family genealogy, I suggest it. Nonetheless, you got to remember, we're talking about racial memory, a cultural perspective that is unique to your ethnicity. We're studying yoga, and for most of us, that's not our cultural perspective. That's not unique to our ethnicity. And yet, there's something universal, appealing about it. It strikes a chord in some aspect of our own humanity that has nothing to do with the cultural divide or the historical divide or the religious beliefs. It's beyond that. Like I often say, Pasteur's discovery of bacillus, how he did pasteurization, whatever. That wasn't French insight. Well, the insight of yoga, as Mr. Iyengar, my teacher, always say, it's not Indian. It's universal. Sanatana Dharma, the universal creed. Nonetheless, it's really important to understand, like if you're a therapist and you study in a white school, at some point they have to teach you, but if your client comes in and they're Polish or they're Mexican or they're whatever, they may not have the same cultural assumptions as you do as a white person in America. If you don't take that into account, you'll be missing certain opportunities to connect to them based on things that make sense, yeah? So remember that about yoga, right? It isn't native to us, and yet at the same time there's a universal human truth. But never forget, it's always going to be inflected by the provincial and local aspect of how it came through the Indian culture. Your inheritance. Oh, yes. We just spent it. Oh, it's a little joke. Are you aware of what you got from your parents? Now that we understand it's universal, ethnic, cultural, but it also comes down to familial. Okay, it's in the genes. Do you look like them? Do you have actions like them? We were just talking about. I always say to my girls, "Listen, I know we had a good relationship, but I want to be a fly on the wall when you guys go to therapy, so I can hear how I scarred you." So one of us was talking about making him do the walkthrough in the Halloween thing, and people jumped out at the wall. My students from DePaul. But then say, "Oh, I'm just like my dad. I go through all the rooms, shutting the lights off, or closing the windows. What do we try to air condition the neighborhood? Those kind of things." Another interesting to see. All right, now of course, some people reject their family completely, and I understand. I also say, spiritually speaking, rarely are two people in the same household born under the same roof. So you have to find your family of affiliation. I do understand that. But again, there still may be things that you're missing. Even if you got a sideways or negative initiation, you got something from that. You have to learn how to turn it to your use. All right, so are you experienced? I always say, I say it another way, it's not psychedelic anymore. Are you trained or untrained?
Trained.
Yeah. So once you get some teachings in yoga, you have to realize you're not the same walking the streets as other people who haven't had this opportunity. And when stuff happens, and it will happen, not because you're wrong, not because you're bad, not because you're doing it not enough, right? It's because it's life, right? That's the problem. The existential problem of life is life. So you're going to get your shit. But if you're trained, you're in a very different mindset. You're in a very different mindset. My wife, God bless her, is taking this volunteer emergency training, CERT. It's a local level of FEMA, like what happens when something erupts into a given community, the scale of which is not large enough to bring in the federal government, like with a huge disaster, right? But a local level, a gas line breaks, or a fire comes out, or there's a chemical spill, or a terrorist attack or something like that. Before the first responders get there, there's a phone chain of people who show up to do simple things and assess what's going on and then pass on the information to other people, right? So whether it's the simplest thing is, did you make sure that the battery for your fire alarm is still working? Do you have a carbon monoxide thing? If your house caught on fire, do you know your escape route? If you have your own home, do you know how to turn off the gas line or the water line or the electricity power? Do you have a go bag ready so that if something happened and you had to leave for 24 hours, you'd have whatever you need, including some really important pieces of paper? Things we don't normally think about, right? That's just for the personal thing. But then when you start bridging out to other people, you realize, have some experience is really important, right? But what does it mean when you got trained in something? Now, my experience in the early days was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And it served me well. I was really trained in all of those things. Which is why I have such a shit-eating grin on my face right now. It's not the only training I took, but I'm saying that was exemplary of what was going on there, right? The freedom, because rock and roll was always like a rebel mindset. It was expressing values that were, counterculture. And obviously, in my generation anyway, although it certainly started, in reefer madness back in the 30s with the propaganda against pot, that drugs were not equated the same kind of positive value as they had in the hippie culture, because drugs were always equated as dope fiend, crime, doctor, disease. So the idea that my generation unpacked the socially sanctioned way of transcending your own consciousness, which throughout time in all different cultures there have been different recognized socially sanctioned ways of getting outside of your own nervous system. And then sexuality, well, again, when the pill came along, it was a tremendous freedom for a lot of people to explore in a way that challenged the other kind of more staid norms. But hopefully when you leave here tonight, you'll say, I'm trained a little bit. All right. So what are you trained to? You're trained to trust your intuition. You're trained to trust the vision that you have. And I love this idea because it just kind of shows you like the funnel is coming in from the head. The golden funnel, I might remind you, coming in from above. Everybody's getting fed from the planes of form above and beyond them. And then it comes out, comes through you. And you could say this is a small representation of like, the heart chakra is filling it, right? And the crown chakra is filling it. See? So vision is coming through. And then it looks like they're painting or they're creating something anyway. And that's another way of talking about the inner guru. A part of you that sees and trusts your gut. Part of it is really coming from your own personal experience. Part of it is coming from this huge deposit of the great other. And maybe you see all those other forms in the background there, the spirits of the ancestors, which then become part of what you embody in your day and age. You're a present-day incarnation of the spirit of the ancestors. So he talked about bridging the old and new. Anybody here is a big tarot fan knows why I chose this, right? You think it's just a camel and there's just like the high-rise in Dubai in the background? Oh, none of you know. No. Because Gimel means camel. It's the third tarot card, the High Priestess. And the camel represents an animal that goes from one locale to another and brings goods, opens up trade, communication, new channels and stuff. So I am a contemporary practitioner wrapping the ancient teachings in a way that's more palatable for masses of people rather than keeping it solely packed in the ashram or the cloistered environment or the fanatic, dogmatic one-sidedness of any given belief system. And all those are still alive and you can pursue those if you want to. But a greater mass of people will probably not become Hinduphiles and not do more than warm their hands at this other cultural fire. Yet we can transport some of those things from the old world into the new world. As I like to say, the tradition is the center core of the tree. And as the tradition moves on, it grows new rings. And those of us who are here right now, keeping the flame alive, are the most recent growth of that tree ring expansion. But we lose contact with the center, we're just flapping in the breeze. That's how you stay connected to the source of your own existence when the wind of change would blow you this way and that way. That means traditional knowledge, knowledge of the elders, exposing yourself to initiation and rites of passage. What you learn from this is that we are biosocial creatures. We're not just individuals who are supposed to blow water out of our own ass. Then you're disconnected to everything that came before, and you don't feel like you have any connection to that which is about to come. And we're supposed to be the harbingers of that. As we've taken from those who came before us, we're going to pass on to those who are coming after us. And although, as you could say, the elder in my community, I certainly take every opportunity I can to bless every young man and woman who I meet and recognize within them the light of consciousness so they can feel good and confident about taking the reins of power over as soon as they're capable, because the world needs it. New perspective, new vision, new ways of expressing these things. Retooling the structures we already have and making them better. I also suggest that you don't forget to praise older people also. Right? Older people also need to hear, I appreciate what you've done, or I appreciate what you've gone through, and, you've always given me support, and you're really solid, thank you so much. Really important for them to hear that as well. And then when you do that, you realize, so you appreciate the ancient wisdom. You like the time-tested wisdom. You like that which is tried and true. Your kung fu is pathetic. Your arm is mine now. All right, so if you're willing to test the truth, yes, don't forget the shamanic quality of the time-tested wisdom. Is he looking at a Peruvian spliff? What is he looking at? I can't tell. But I like his beadwork. I'm telling you got to learn to accessorize when you're in one of these like medicine places. You got to look the part. I'm serious. Like if you go to study with a Freudian guy, he has that tweed jacket with the leather things on the elbow. He has his pipe there, the big desk and, the thing on the wall that legitimizes. Same thing. If he didn't look like it was a freaky groove, like, ooh, you wouldn't want to be with him, And he plays musical instruments because sound is so important in the shamanic tradition. And if you know anything about the relationship of the history of religious ideas connecting shamanism, pre-civilization, to yoga, which has so many shamanic roots, but then yoga also is connected to one of the oldest great civilizations, which, by the way, is only 6,000 years old in terms of what we can extrapolate from them. But remember, the Aborigines in Australia claim 40,000 years of continuous culture. We just know so little about them because just in, not in our hemisphere and white privilege and all that kind of crap. But 40,000 years, you know anything about dream time? You want to talk about astral realities, whether or not there are things that we don't know, more than dreamt of in your philosophy, Yeah. Anyway, these cats, and they're women too, know stuff. They're not priests and priestesses, which means what? They're not functionaries of a system expounding the doctrine but having no direct personal experience with the deity. That's not what shamanism is about. Somehow they have found a way in various indigenous cultures to open their receptivity to forces, we would say, of nature, because most of the time they're very, very into the forces of nature, but they don't see those forces as less than our version of something transcendent to those forces, right? So that's we accuse them of pantheism. Everything is God. We don't like that. We like panentheism. That word "en" makes a difference. We like the idea that the spirit is in everything, but the spirit isn't contained solely by everything. That panentheism is what gives it the transcendent aspect while still being in the embodied form. So we accept its immanence, but we also accept its transcendence from that. They don't get into that theological debating kind of stuff. That's very, very Western. They just have an experience of the deities. So this knowledge is passed on through personal instruction and apprenticeship. Just like yoga. You don't get it just from reading books. You get it from osmosis, hanging out with the person, and the transmission of the techniques. I'm going to show you how to prepare the herb, and this is what you put on when the person has a wound, right? Because they're usually healers also, right? They're not only just people you go to like the, you see the people who put out their cards on the neon lights, La Esperanza, come in and have your tarot reading, for 10 minutes. I'll read 3 cards and tell you what your past is, like that. Okay. No, you're not hanging out with that person. And they know that when you're there that you got some kind of need. Now, these are people who are covering a lot of different societal necessities, whether it's learning how to heal people, or whether it's like the Eskimo shamans who could get out of their body and do astral travel and then come back and say the caribou herd is 50 miles north from here. It'll take us 6 days walk there, but then if we do this and we get it, we'll have meat for the whole winter. How do they find that out? They didn't have no GPS. They didn't have a car to drive there. They didn't have any satellite communication. This is real shit we're talking about. Right? Ancestral knowledge passed on through personal instruction and apprenticeship. That's what we're doing. I always like to remind us, the elders love to bless the younger generation. You don't have to do anything to get the blessing. The fact that you're even just alive and present, that's it. Because you don't even realize that it's the vitality of your own life force that blesses the elder. Just being in the room with my daughters, I'm not waiting for what they will become. I'm not putting any pressure on them. Like, so what do you got to show for your life now that we spent X amount on your, and now you're nannying, No. Just by virtue of the fact that you are. Oh, are you kidding me? And hopefully it goes the other way. You have the biology of admiration within you. You have to find the teaching, and eventually, if you remember, by a consequence of the fact that everybody is part of the living spirit, you can find this if you change your eyeballs to see this in any human being. Sometimes it seems like they put up such a force field, it's hard to break through and see what that is. But you'll find some older person in your life. And don't have to be like 50 years older than you, just a few years older. It's enough to be a mentor. And to honor them. They need you as much as we need you. Oh, we're together, yeah. So wisdom instructs from direct experience and the counsel of years. I've got a lot of stories to tell. A lot of stories to tell. I don't know if I'm probably waiting until my spiritual autobiography is posthumously published, because I have so many bones in my closet. I don't want any of that shit coming out while I'm alive. You know what I'm saying? Never running for political office. No way. Okay. But so do you. Your whole life is nothing but stories. Remember, every time I meet someone, I assume something good could be generated between us. Right? Or, go further, Spirit has sent this person into my life. I don't know why, but I'm going to pay attention because I know everything that's happened in my life. I know nothing about what's happening in your life. That is so freaking interesting to me. And especially if you meet somebody from another culture who doesn't speak your language, or has a different belief system than you, or sexual orientation, or whatever, right? I love that new one coming out now. I was just saying to my daughters, because I always like to remember all the things I did with them growing up. So I said, we went to Vancouver one year to watch the International Fireworks Festival and then attend the Gay Pride Parade. Now, of course, they must have been like 6 and 8, whatever, like that. They had no idea what gay people were about. They didn't know. So we have these great pictures of us with the drag queens, right? And now there's just such liberal thinkers, because they were just exposed to something. There was no explanation. There was no spin on it one way or the other. It was just a fun experience with people who were like, having a celebration. And now there's a new one coming up at drag queens in New York City. It's a fantastic thing, the way the normalization of people who are thought to be on the fringe and who are therefore rejected because of some way they appear to be. And that's what, you don't know me, the Tiffany Haddish thing. You don't know me, and then you find that, right. Strip away the thing that makes you think there's something different, weird, wrong, strange about them. Remember, you can't have community if you don't include the strange and the weird, right? Can't have community. And you realize, no, they're just another human being. Okay, so you got thrown off by the purple hair and the lip things over here, and and the ear hanging down below there. But it doesn't mean they're not a beautiful human being and very creative and going through the same drama of life. Where'd you lose that connection? Wisdom instructs you from direct experience and the counsel of years. Now, sacred space is hard to sometimes get into because you have to learn the difference between the maze and the labyrinth. The maze is designed to trap you and keep you in it. The labyrinth is designed to help you find your way to the center eventually. And then if you're smart, you'll be able to find your way back out. Because sometimes people get to the center and they lose their mind, so to speak. Something goes off. They get touched, Whereas like when I went to visit Shams, right? Our friend who got into an accident and got put into like a holding tank of people that are, highly unlikely that their life is going to regenerate into something that will seem to be normal compared to where they were before. So I got into the elevator to go visit my friend, and this one of the people who I guess was living there walked in, looks at me, turns around to other people, and says, "This one's not right." Anyway, so the labyrinth, if you know anything about Greek mythology, was like the Minotaur, this animal that was created from the union of a god with a mortal, and then the curse of the king was that it had sacrificed a virgin every year to keep the Minotaur satisfied. So Daedalus, who was the Leonardo da Vinci of his kingdom, created this labyrinth to keep the animal in. And every year a virgin would have to get sacrificed, and they would somehow find their way to the center, and the Minotaur would eat them and go on. Then the king's daughter finally was the last one to go, or something like that. But Theseus, the king of Athens, fell in love with her and wanted to save her, and she didn't want to die either, but she had to go do her thing. So she went to Daedalus and said, "Is there no way we can figure out how to get to the labyrinth and get back and not get lost?" Very, very simple. He gave her a skein of thread and said, "Just unroll the thread as you go, and then if he gets to the center and kills the Minotaur, he can just follow the way thread back." That's called Ariadne's thread. So in some way, you want to say yoga, life is a maze designed to keep you trapped with no exit, or is life a labyrinth that you can find your way to the center, and then you have to not get lost in the center, right? If you find the pearl of great price, you have to bring it back and from the collective hunt and share it with other people. But in order to do that, you have to find your way back. Yoga, you could say, is one of those paths that teach you how to find the center, or how to find the transcendent if you want to, but not to get lost in the abstract, not to get lost in the metaphysical, but to stay in the incarnation for as long as you're embodied, and find your way back to give your gifts, to share what you have. I'm a big Jung fan, not that I don't appreciate Freud or Adler or Reich or other Karen Horney, greats in the field. Louise von Franz, one of his main female disciples, who did a shitload of work on fairy tales, and his influence on guidance by active imagination, creating images inside your own head and having a dialogue with them, rather than thinking that the voices inside your own head are a sign of some kind of satanic takeover. Boy, have we lost the art of introspection. And instead realizing they are like sub-personalities, which if you weren't afraid of allowing yourself to have a dialogue, instead of with a projected invisible being in some other world, with a projected invisible being inside your own skull that speaks to you from a certain perspective. And if you had a dialogue with it, all of a sudden you would be making it more real, even though it's just another part of yourself. But since it's so hard when you think of yourself as solely your ego, to be integrated, because these autonomous personalities seem to have a mind of their own. It's still you. It's hard to believe it's you. Very, very good. Get counseling. Right? And I hope you hear me say it enough, right, for my students. Right? In this world, I'm all for sibling society. We should all have equal opportunity, not equal outcome. That ain't possible, but equal opportunity. So to that extent, it's very democratic. We're all the same. We all don't know the same that we don't know, and we all know the same we know. But that's not the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, there's a vertical hierarchy. So get over it. And you want someone who knows more than you. Or as I like to say in my life, when a student calls me and says, "I have a brain tumor, what should I do?" I don't know what to do. I only have 200 hours training. I want someone who knows more than me to tell me what to do. That can only happen if you humble yourself to somebody who's an authority, who you know knows more than you. And you'll have to probably study with them for decades before you even get a piece of the fingernail of what they know. But still, you aspire to do that. That's good counseling and guidance. Because at one point, they won't be there. as JC says. Enjoy the bridegroom while you have an opportunity to be with him. I don't care where you go to get your psychic connection. If you want to consult with the divinatory oracle, again, love her outfit. That makes her more believable than if you're just in like, right? Have you seen the Long Island psychic, with the Louis Vuitton bag and then it doesn't matter, right? Or, go through the Stargate, It doesn't matter, the images are the same, right? Or find your connection with the anime people now, connecting the future to the past. Right? Take the tarot card. Does it really matter? Once you understand the forms, how they come, if that's what will help you trust your intuition, believe that somebody else, so take out the Ouija board. Anything works when you're connected. So, yoga to me represents an aspect of human beings who are ahead of their time, like Leonardo was. I look to understand what was the scope of the original vision of the yogis that is timeless. It's just as true now as it was true then. The only difference is it cannot be expressed in the same form that it was expressed in then. Of course, no form can completely capture the absolute. But it's not supposed to be captured. It can't be captured. It just has to be presented in ways that are applicable for its moment in time, historically and geographically now. Or as Jesus said, you cannot put old wine into new wine into old wineskins. It'll burst the bag. So we have a job to be the people who are ahead of our time. What does that mean? To me, it seems so clear. Planetary awareness. Right? We used to say, act locally, think globally. That's still so visionary for so many people, even though there's so many things in terms of economics and communication that would already indicate we're already in the Aquarian age. Even though by the precession of the equinoxes, it's not going to be for another 120 years or 150 years, right? But we're the harbingers of that vision that connects us all. We have to be the tribe that are the people that are ahead of their time, which is frustrating because when your heart is open, it hurts to see what we're capable of and to see what we actually still do. Right? So that's why the world is still rife with suffering. We're not yet as near as we could be to what we're potentially capable of being. And that hurts, or at least it hurts me. Anyway, find a way to get initiated. We're right near the end here. Find a way to get initiated. Find the person who will conduct entry and exit in and out of transformative space. I'm going to show you how to do that in the asana. How many times do I say, right? Entering and exiting the asana is the asana, not just holding the asana. You're not understanding what I'm doing? I don't think so. But it doesn't only come in a male form. I don't care. You can take the high priestess form, the cosmic virgin, whose fertility and fruitfulness set the balance of all opposites. Right? She's between the pillars of mercy and severity. Right? But she's fruitful. Look at the background, the whole pomegranate thing, right? Pineapples and the pomegranates, right? Both anti-inflammatory, by the way. So it doesn't matter where you find the initiation. It can come from like the Jewish high priest. It can come from the high priestess in the tarot. But the idea is for us to have some kind of expertise, some kind of knowledge at our fingertips that shows us and reminds us where we are, where we're going, when we're off the track. Please make a 90-degree turn, whatever. The teaching is supposed to be a guideline to a certain extent. Just like the map is not the territory, but it kind of helps in a certain way. And even if you have a GPS, right, it still may not be updated. All of a sudden, it tells you go, and then they couldn't say there was a construction here. Why didn't they know? That's where you have to think on your feet, right? But yoga is a kind of roadmap that's going to tell you where you are, and especially if you accept the traditional values like the chakra teachings, which don't really come online till 900 AD, right? Where the teaching says that if you go into the samyama or the fused states of samadhi in the different levels of the chakras, you hear different sounds representing which stage of consciousness you're at. And then the teacher can tell you whether you're there or not by which sound you're telling him you're here, or telling her you're here. Becomes really clear. So to that extent, it's a roadmap. The teacher can say, I've been here, I know where it is, let me know where you are. Oh, this is where you are, and then tell you what you have to do, if you believe in following that model. All right, so, is this the sunrise or a sunset? I don't know. But for those of you who are younger than me, what do you think will happen in 20 years? Where do you think you'll be in 20 years? Do you have any vision? Because I always like to say, I hope you have a vision for the future. I hate to think that young people are growing up with no vision for the future. You've got to make some choices to help direct the future. Like to say, you want to create the future, you got to invent it. To control the future, if there's such thing as control, right? Whose job is that? Or, somebody ought to do something about that. Yeah, who? 20 years from now. I know it's tough to get that far out ahead, because conditions will change, and if you make your plans now based on what the current situation is, a year from now, let alone 5, 10, 20 years from now, it won't be the same situation that you're making the choice from. So it just creates what I think of an increasing capacity for error in terms of accuracy. However, that being said, what is visionary thinking all about? What is putting images in your mind that don't exist yet to your senses and bringing that about? That is another capacity that we have. So there's like this left brain capacity that rationally knows I can't get too far out thinking ahead in the future because it's not going to be the same a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years, who knows 20 years from now. But if that kind of prevents me, paralyzes me in that kind of analysis from doing anything, then nothing gets done and I'm just sitting on my lazy, dumb ass, which is not good for the potential that you have. You've got to think visionarily. You got to hold something in front of you. What's going to motivate you to keep going in that direction? And I say, it's dancing. What I really mean is find what creates freedom and flow for you. Find what helps you touch that which is in you, which is not restricted by time. This is a paradox. I accept at one level, I am limited in time and space. So when I say, I don't know how many more times I'm going to do this, it's not because I have some morbid sense that tomorrow I may not work up, which is true, but it's not morbid. I don't have any immediate knowledge that I'm terminally ill, although, like a thief in the night, death is no respecter of age. It has nothing to do with whether you're well or you're not well, although chances are probably greater. A person who has cancer metastasized over the whole body probably has that on their plate much more intensely, viscerally than I do. But I do also, because I'm older and I'm thinking about it more than I have, and probably more of my life is behind me than ahead of me. Although there could be a genetic breakthrough tomorrow, and I'll realize maybe I'm only half done with my life. Maybe. So at one level, I don't think I have an open, unending amount of time, and I do the things really important, reduce the possibilities to probabilities, and then really do some stern, critical analysis on even of those probabilities, which is still bordering on pipe dreams, right? Or as I like to say for my young students, what's the difference between a fantasy and a dream? The fantasy is the one you don't put any energy into. But at the same time, I want to live in eternity. And I continue to generate projects and act as if I have an unending amount of time to do whatever the hell I want, knowing full well that when the Grim Reaper comes, and I already believe I'm on borrowed time, I've had a number of near-death experiences in my life, I'm on borrowed time, so I'm very, very happy for every day I have. And I know already, yes, that when the day comes, there will be things that never got out of the gate to begin with. Too bad. And there are things that are on the back burner, they're slowly cooking, but they didn't get to the next stage. And there are things that are a little further along, and there are little things that I actually did. And that's how it's going to be every single time whenever death comes. Still, knowing that, put the pedal to the metal and go ahead. And then if you do this, you're going to find you have unusual psychic gifts. And I don't mean you'll just be able to read other people's minds, right? That's not what I mean. You have, the beauty of intelligence is everybody's smart in a different way. How you will perceive this in your life is not up to me to tell you. Or as I like to say, I can't tell the Holy Spirit how it should come through another person. It's not my job. My job is to try to get out of the way, so whatever spirit is vouchsafed to me to come through me, let me do it as purely and cleanly as I can, while accepting the fact that I'm an imperfect human being, but I'm still worthy of love. Because I'd rather believe what the Spirit says, that everybody's worthy of love, rather than my own judgment. So I'm not worthy of love, because if you knew this about me, you'd say, oh, you know that about me and you still think I'm worthy of love? God, you're really cool. Okay. All right. Unusual psychic gifts, you all have them. Freedom and flow, find what works for you. Be a visionary, but at the same time realize what needs to happen in the short term. Right? You have an inner GPS, knowledge at your fingertips. Use it, follow your roadmap. Whether it's the female or the male initiation that you get from the elder, take it. Learn how to go in and out of transformative space. You are one of the people who are ahead of your time. Recognize what that is. Find your psychic connection in the various forms that may exist out there. It doesn't matter how you find it. Get counsel and guidance from someone in a vertical hierarchy in your life. Find your way in and out of the labyrinth. Respect the traditional wisdom that comes from direct experience and the counsel of years. Get blessed by an elder and bless elders yourself. Study about the shamanic tradition. When you are an individual practitioner of yoga, you're like a shaman to have a direct experience of the deity, not mediated by the priests or the priestesses. Right? Remember the ancient time-tested wisdom. Respect traditional knowledge. Bridge the old and the new. Be a sluice gate through which that which is above and beyond comes through, so your intuition can create. Know that you're really trained. Have compassion on the people who are untrained. Even if your inheritance said, fuck you, what'd you learn from it? Racial memory, always keep that in mind when you're thinking about what the Indian mindset is all about. It's not our mindset, but we still can learn something unique from their ethnicity because it's universal. Study your own family genealogy. Your roots and your ancestry are really, really important, in my opinion. Because if you do this, you'll see the commonality between you and other people whose ethnicities are different than your own, and that'll bind you together, and that's why you'll be able to see the vision of where we are as a planetary species. And then find the wise old man. May the fourth be with you. That's it for today.